This is Trader's Workshop with Adam H. Grimes. Hello, welcome to episode 6 of Trader's Workshop, Conspiracy Theories. I am Adam Grimes, and I am your host. You can find more of my work at adamhgrimes.com, and I'm going to assume you are already following me on Twitter at adamhgrimes, but if you're not, go do that. Okay, so were you aware that in the top levels of the world government, it's populated by reptilians? These are reptiles. Now, they're shape-shifting reptiles, so they usually look like humans. In fact, you cannot tell them apart from humans, but they're actually alien reptilians who are controlling the world government for, I don't know. Okay, that's as far as I can go with it. You probably are aware that some people have some kind of exotic and strange beliefs. You probably have some friends. You may have had some of these. You may have some of these right now. This is a topic I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've been thinking about how and why this is important for traders in financial markets. So that's what we're going to do today. Big picture overview. I'll start with some examples and tell you how my thinking on this has evolved. Then we'll look at why people believe things like this. Then we will look at how people believe things. That's an interesting part of the puzzle too. Then we'll bring it into financial markets. We'll look at some conspiracy theories in financial markets, and we'll talk about some ways you can shape your thinking to provide some degree of defense against these conspiracy theories. So what is a conspiracy theory? Well, there are a lot of them. Some of them are actually pretty widespread. You know, the idea that the assassination of JFK was an inside job, that there was not just one shooter. And these really cover a range of plausibility. The idea that the moon landings were faked, to the idea that the earth is flat. Anybody who is telling you the earth is a globe, they're lying to you. All of these pictures from outer space, they're fake. They're photoshopped. Have you noticed if you go up in an airplane, the horizon doesn't look curved? You know, people have all of these explanations, and some of these are actually quite interesting. The Earth rests in a giant ball of ice. I always found that one kind of curious because the Earth is flat, but it rests in a giant sphere of ice. I don't exactly understand that. Or there are other theories that the earth is hollow and there are either dinosaurs or aliens or advanced humans inside the earth. Just aliens in general, you know, the crash at Roswell and I almost said the fact. We should be careful with that phrase, right? The fact, I'll go ahead and use it, that aliens have been secretly communicating with humans for a long time, have been abducting humans to subject them to various tests and probes. Ideas like that to ideas that the contrails that jet planes leave in the atmosphere, that many of those are actually the government spraying something. What are they spraying? We don't know. It makes us very nervous, right? But the spray, some of the explanations, mind control, of course, that's a popular conspiracy theory. Or they're controlling the weather. Somebody this weekend told me that the contrails were designed to pull hurricanes toward islands. I don't really know what to say. And there are people who believe one or more of these. There are people who really kind of fall headfirst into the conspiracy theory jumble. I have a friend on Facebook who actually runs a quantitative research-ish company. And over the past few years, I'm kind of concerned about the guy because he's posting conspiracy theories all the time. Pizzagate, Flat Earth, various other strange things. And, you see somebody thinking like this, and your first reaction is maybe you make fun of the belief. Some of these are absurd on the surface. I hope you thought the reptilians were absurd. then you might get angry, you might get confrontational, then you might get worried about the person, like, is something wrong? Does this person have a brain tumor? And it's a little bit disturbing if you watch a friend kind of descend into this. But this happens to a lot of people. It happens to enough people that I think, and this is what really got me interested in the topic, it happens to enough people that I think it says something fundamental and important about human cognition. And that's really I don't want to make fun of some of these conspiracy theories, and I certainly don't want to look down on anybody who believes these things. But I think if we really investigate the thought process that goes behind this, we're going to understand how we think and how we're vulnerable to making mistakes, because that's really what we need to understand, right? So why would people believe these things? Well, some people would answer that with kind of a factual statement, and they would say there are things that you might think were conspiracy theories that have turned out to be true. And this is true. For instance, it has come out that the government was spraying things in various neighborhoods and doing experiments on the populace. So there is some justification to distrust, and it's just enough justification that it's easy to kind of spiral in all of this. So that might be one reason. Some people would say, well, there are factual reasons. I think another reason is that these are just kind of exciting. Somebody, more than one of you, probably has already Googled some of the things that I was talking about, and you're probably reading conspiracy theory pages as I speak. There is something that, it's the same way that a good television show or a good novel grabs you. Perhaps it's fiction, but it can be very engaging fiction. And I can remember there was a radio talk show host many, many years ago who had a late night radio show that was all about these conspiracy theories. And he brought on guests that some were quite convincing, some were not at all convincing, but even if they weren't convincing, talking about shadow people and basically ghosts that can manipulate the physical world, even if you don't believe that, it's still kind of fun to think, what if? And I think maybe that is part of it. Also, by the way, I hope that some of the flat earth people are really just kind of playing with us, that they think it's funny, though you always have to be concerned if you come up with a joke and people can't tell if you're joking or you're really that dumb, which is where I think a lot of the flat earth stuff descends into. You have to be careful about that. But it just feels good to think about and to believe these. It also can feel very good if you take these seriously. You belong to a group. And more than that, you're a group of insiders. You belong to a select group of people who know the truth that everybody else is so stupid and so blind, and you belong to this very small group. And that's a big thing in human thought, right? To belong to a group, you belong to a special group. I think another reason that many people fall into these conspiracy theories is that they give us certainty. And that, by the way, is going to be a big one for us as traders. We live in a world, at least my worldview, is that a lot of what we experience is due to luck and chance. Not everything, not all of it, but pretty much everything that happens has a component of luck. And it took me a good chunk of my adult life to accept that, by the way. I think a lot of people fight against that. I've certainly seen that with traders. There are plenty of traders who will tell you that luck has nothing to do with it. And, well, it ultimately does. In any success or failure, there is a component of luck. But if you can believe in conspiracy theories, then you can believe maybe you don't control it, but somebody does. Somebody is in control, and there is a degree of certainty that is very comforting, because as humans, we have trouble with uncertainty. We have trouble with randomness. We fight against that so much to reduce it. And conspiracy theories provide a good way to do that. I think, and I want to say this without being unkind, I think another common thread with a lot of conspiracy theories is that there is a certain degree of, I don't really know how to say this kindly, but let's say lack of education. I think that, and it may be education about facts. So, if you learn a little bit about science and about math, you would understand why the horizon looks flat, right? And you would some of these things the flat earth people talk about, you would understand that it is, in reality, how it works, and in a little bit of knowledge is good defense against that. But so there's the facts, but there's also the how to think. And there's how to think about problems and how to think about what is most likely to be true. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And certainly the internet seems a lot of people struggle with that. And then on a related note, it's okay to be wrong. And this goes back to the certainty, and this definitely plays into financial markets, right? If you are going to be a trader or investor on any time frame, you're going to have to embrace a high degree, at least a certain degree of uncertainty, and you're going to have to be okay with being wrong. You're going to be wrong a lot. And so, I know I'm kind of blurring the lines here between our isolated conspiracy theory discussion and financial markets, but that really is the point, is understanding how we can use this thinking to inform our interactions with the market. So that's maybe why people tend to believe these things. It's fun, the sense of belonging, sense of having secret knowledge, and really wanting to nail down, to reduce the uncertainty. But from a practical standpoint, so do a thought experiment with me. Let's choose one of those crazy ones. Let's use the reptilians. This idea that there are shape-shifting reptile aliens in charge of the world governments. How would you believe that? Can you put yourself in that situation? Just think about it for a moment, and maybe fast forward to some world in which you actually believe that. And if you do actually believe that, just don't email me, okay? Please. I know somebody is going to, but like one way you might come by that knowledge would be if it was revealed to you, if you were talking to a world leader and they morphed into a reptile and told you this was true. You probably want to take a look at the items you had consumed that day if that happened to you. But, you could have that experience. And that would be quite difficult to argue against. But, pulling that out, assuming that did not happen, we find some very interesting things about conspiracy theories. First of all, many times these theories are ideas that cannot be falsified. It is quite difficult to prove if you set out to disprove the reptilian theory. So then what are you setting out to prove? Well, you're setting out to prove that every world leader is a normal human and not a shape-shifting reptile alien. Honestly, I don't know how you construct that experiment, right? So what you have created here with the conspiracy theory is something that is potentially very, if you choose to believe it, if you start from a place of believing it, it's quite hard to disprove through any type of experiment. Or, I want to say logic, but it seems like this would fail on several logical levels, right? You also will find, as I said before, the beliefs tend to offer something. That maybe it's an explanation of the world we live in. Maybe it is something emotional. But there is something that is very desirable about these beliefs. Remember, we're thinking about how people are able to believe these. And it is possible that in some cases that all of those reasons why, the sense of belonging, just the fun of believing these things might be enough with some of these theories to tip somebody over the edge to where they would believe them. a very interesting idea. So everything I just told you is kind of stuff that I would have told you a year ago, but I've read a book recently, which I'm going to strongly suggest you go read. It's called How Not to Be Wrong. The author's Jordan Ellenberg, who is a mathematician. And, I'll plug the book a little bit here. It is a brilliant book. It's the kind of book that is easily accessible, but it's also deep. It is obvious that this is an author that has an understanding of math and meaning behind math and ways to use math and logic that for those of us who do not have that background, we can't even touch it. Yet he manages to make it very accessible without talking down to the audience, without dumbing it down to the audience. His presentation in this book, How Not to Be Wrong, is the type of writing that I aspire to do. And I think it's extremely difficult to do, and it's so well done. So read that book. But an idea that I got from that book related to conspiracy theories is that they're often wrapped in a protective belief. For instance, the idea that, let's use the reptilians, and let's say that that's the core belief, that's the conspiracy belief. The protective belief, meaning the belief that protects the reptilian belief, is the belief that the government is lying to you about everything. So then, any piece of evidence that I would give you against the reptilian theory would have a very difficult time getting through that protective belief. And if we do attack that, and you might, another example might be the idea that 9/11 was an inside job. Today is September 11th, 2018. It's that I feel like that's an entirely separate discussion. Yeah. So, the idea that was an inside job by the government or the military industrial complex, and then you put a wrapper around that all of the news, everything the government says to you is a lie and you can't trust any of it. Well, it's hard to address the inside job idea because you can't get through the everything you see is a lie idea. That's quite interesting. And I do definitely see that structure functioning in some of the beliefs that people have in the market. So let's turn to the market. What are some conspiracy theories in the market? Well, how about this? The plunge protection team. So there's this idea, particularly in the S&P 500 or the major stock indexes, that every time the index goes down a little bit, the government has a desk where somebody pushes a button and buys. And I'm not saying necessarily, by the way, that all of these are completely untrue. There's probably, in a lot of these market conspiracy theories, there's probably a seed, or in some cases more than a seed, of truth to some of these. The idea that they got my stop, that the market makers pushed the market to the point where my stop was triggered. That's a very common feeling, or the feeling that price action is being manipulated and controlled, and somehow people are making the market move against me. The curious thing with that, and again, I want to try to stay focused here, you would feel that no matter what position you had on. I guarantee you, if we put two traders in a room and we had one of them at the exact instant buy stock indexes, the other one sell the stock indexes, and we ask them, so one's long, one's short, and we ask them after the trade was over, they both would very likely report feeling manipulated. And I don't really quite know from a practical perspective how to deal with this, because we do know the research shows that humans are very good at pulling intent out of price action. From a practical standpoint, my rule with this is, somebody will say, is a market manipulated? My answer is yes. That's my default assumption. Every financial market is manipulated, always. And if you can't deal with that, if you can't work within the structure of that manipulation, then you can't participate in the market. But that's one of the conspiracy theories. Another one that I would say, which kind of rises to the same level, is this idea that price movements are governed by magic ratios. by, let's say, Gann angles or Fibonacci ratios, that there's this whole deep structure in the market that normal people can't see. But if you're in the inside group, you're aware of how important these levels are, and you can see things that normal people can't. You can see how some of these beliefs might be kind of benign. Some of these beliefs might not affect your actions that much. Some of them, however, this is one of the things that I've seen with developing traders, it's very easy to fall into a spiral. It's very easy to feel, and I'm developing traders, I've seen very experienced traders, traders managing tens of millions of dollars, just freak out because the central bank manipulated their S&P short against them. It could be that, or it could be that on average over the period of any number of days, S&P tends to go up and you were short. It might be the reality of the market. In fact, it probably is. And I think if you focus too much on the conspiracy theory behind the market, the problem is responsibility. Right? And we'll talk about that much more through the podcast, but it takes the responsibility for your actions away from you and puts the blame somewhere else. And you're never going to build a long-term successful career until you can fully accept the responsibility, the risk, the consequences for your actions. Whether you're a short-term trader or a long-term investor, it's very much the same picture. And that is one of the biggest problems I see, is that it lets you externalize all of the responsibility because, it's out of your control. Of course the market maker got my stop. That loss isn't my fault. Where if you are forced to face and accept the loss, you realize, okay, did I make a mistake and trade something that's not in my plan? Well, then absolutely it's my fault. Did I make a mistake? No. And was it just a normal loss? Then it's just luck. It's just the random luck of the draw. I close my eyes, I reach into the bag, and I pull out a black marble this time. That happens about half the time, maybe a little less, maybe a little more than half, but I just happen to randomly have a losing trade. But if we're uncomfortable with that uncertainty, then it's very easy to say, they did it to me, right? See how that works? So how do we defend against this kind of thinking? What can we do about it, right? Well, one answer, of course, is to educate yourself as well as you can, both in the facts, in whatever subject is being considered, but also in continuing to do things that strengthen your thinking and your ability to think in different ways. An example would be reading that book I suggested. Whatever you can do to make your thinking more rigorous and more structured is probably going to help. Other concrete defenses, so one of the things that people throw out a lot is Occam's razor. Most of you are probably familiar with that. And that is the idea, it comes from a really old guy at 1300s probably, who came up with the idea that in any given situation, the simplest explanation is probably right. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you that's how you defeat conspiracy theories, but you need to be careful with that because Occam's razor is a good guide. Where in my mind it's most effective is this idea that if we have two models or two explanations that both seem to work equally well, both have been effectively proven, and we're trying to choose between which one we favor, well, in that case, we would probably go with the simplest. But it's not always clear, not at all clear, what the simplest actually is. Because, for instance, consider the JFK assassination. To many people, they would tell you that the simplest explanation was there was another shooter. if you look at many of you have probably looked at this material, and for a single shooter to be able to manipulate the gun that accurately, that quickly, and then for the bullet to take what appeared to have been some quite improbable bounces, a lot of people might very well look at that and say, well, if we're applying Occam's razor, that is not, that a single shooter is not the simplest explanation. So, and also, quantum mechanics seems to be the right explanation for a lot of things. And it doesn't seem to be, at least in my primitive monkey mind, that's not the simplest explanation for anything, but experiments are showing over and over that it's right. Relativity also, intuitively doesn't make sense. So I do think we need to be careful with that. But generally, you can kind of get a sense if something has become so convoluted and you need so many layers to protect it. Run with the reptilian idea for a while. You'll see at some point that you probably just reached an absurd degree of complexity, and you might need to reevaluate that. I do think that, as I said, structuring your thinking, cultivating skepticism, be skeptical. And a lot of people, by the way, who believe conspiracy theories would say this is what they're doing, except they're doubting, perhaps they're doubting the wrong thing. But particularly in trading, in the last podcast, I kind of laid out a grid that showed why I have made the conscious decision to be extremely skeptical and extremely critical of any trading idea. Because the consequence of me accepting a bad idea is quite serious, while the consequence of me rejecting a good idea, first of all, it's less likely because there are not so many good trading ideas. So just given a trading idea, the chance that it is a good one is already quite a bit less. But if I reject a good idea, it's not nearly as bad as the consequence of accepting a bad idea. So this is why I have made a conscious decision to be very skeptical and very aggressively confrontational with any trading idea. And this makes me a bad social media member, by the way. And if you and I have had a run-in, I'll apologize. But this is what I do to my own thinking, and it's a little bit painful when you do it to somebody else. But so you kind of got to learn to temper that. But I do think that approach will fix a lot of this, particularly in the market. Always think critically. Always cultivate the skill of being wrong. And as I said, we're going to talk about that through the podcast series. For so many of us, it's so natural. We hate to be wrong. Who wants to be wrong? It doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't feel good. It affects our self-worth. We feel and look stupid. And so we find all of these ways to fight against being wrong. But if you understand your actions in the market correctly, there is nothing to feel stupid about when you are wrong. In fact, accepting being wrong is really one of the most important steps on that path to being a consistently profitable trader. So that's why, it's a little bit of a joke, but I would say be good, become skilled at being wrong. And, then you can work on being right. And last, I think, is really strive to accept uncertainty, to think about, even if we live in this world where everything is so uncertain, where so many things are governed by this boiling pot of random chance, that even if that is true, that we can find some degree of certainty within that. And these are, again, as traders, this is why we think in large numbers. This is why we think about governing our interactions with the market. So why we think about things like plan and discipline, and why that is so important, because that gives us tools which I think are absolutely essential to focus, to be able to, what am I trying to say? To be able to remove as much as possible the impact of chance. It's still going to be there, but you can drive toward the edge in your system and work on pulling some consistent profits out of the market. So I hope that was interesting and not too terribly convoluted, and I hope I don't get too many emails about the reptilians, but I'm ready for them because I've been doing this long enough. I know they are coming. I guess the key takeaways would be that I think there's value in thinking about these extreme beliefs, whether you choose to think of it as ways that human cognition goes wrong. That's kind of how I framed it out. You may have a different opinion of it, but understanding the reasons people might believe extreme things, and then the ways in which very intelligent people are sometimes able to believe very, very strange things. That really tells us a lot about our own cognitive biases and about ways that our own belief system can go wrong and ways that we might have some blind spots. And so we'll wrap up there for today. I'm going to ask you to go check out one of my websites. Go to marketlifetrading.com. If you have not seen it already, I do have a very extensive free trading course, hundreds of pages of PDFs, 30 hours of video courses. Will really walk you through some of the things that we talked about here with thinking in terms of probabilities, with thinking how to connect this. Admittedly, this podcast is a little abstract, but that course will take you through understanding randomness and how it impacts your interaction with the markets. So go check it out, marketlifetrading.com. Also, as I said at the beginning, follow me on Twitter at Adam H. Grimes, and I will see you back very soon for another episode. Thank you very much.